Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 8, Episode 9. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. We've got a fantastic panel for you today. We're really excited about Project Voice 2023. It's not quite yet 30 days out, but we're getting close. And a lot going on with the Conversational AI Leadership Council, a lot going on with the buzz around everything that ChatGPT is creating, and we're excited about it. We've got a fantastic panel of guests on the show, and Amy, I'm going to start with you. Take a moment, tell us who you are, and tell us about Authenticx, right?
Authenticx.
Authenticx, perfect. Yeah, tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I started Authenticx in 2018 after spending 20 years living and working in the complex mess that is our healthcare system. And I do not have a technical background. I have an operations background and ran contact centers as a big part of my career. And I became super fascinated with the power of those conversations and yet how very little they were leveraged and utilized for business strategy. And so maybe with a big chip on my shoulder, I decided to leave my corporate career and start Authenticx with the goal of leveraging AI to help healthcare industry listen at scale to the customer voices that flow into their brand and into their company all day, every day. And so Authenticx considers itself part of the conversational intelligence suite of products, but we really focus on listening and helping leaders make sense of the themes, issues that are driving business value. And we only work in healthcare. And so our AI models have been trained exclusively by healthcare conversational data, labeled by healthcare professionals. And therefore, our models are really focused on solving problems that healthcare companies are uniquely faced with.
That's excellent. Authenticx. So yeah, so as I routinely say on this show, I'm born and raised in the South, so it takes me a little bit longer than most people, but thank you for joining us. Next up is Lauren Koretzki. Lauren, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. Lauren Koretzki, Vice President of Partnerships and Client Experience at Wysa. At Wysa, we are a global mental health organization using AI to handle everything from low to moderately high individuals dealing with depression, anxiety, stress, sleep issues, relationship challenges, etc. Wysa was built in 2016. To date, we've served over 5 million individuals. We've had 500 million conversations using our AI tool, and we're present currently in 65 countries. So really helping as globally as we can to help scale the overwhelming gap in resources to need that exists in mental health and has only continued to grow and gotten exacerbated in the last few years as a result of the pandemic. Our chatbot that drives the AI is using a combination of tools, largely conversational. So the chatbot is intended to feel like a friend that you're talking to. In fact, an early tagline was your 4 a.m. friend, because everyone needs someone that will listen to them when they're dealing with challenges. And those challenges don't always fit neatly into a box with a therapist once a week or once a month, if you're lucky to get an appointment. And so we are in the North American market, as well as, like I said, globally, with a relatively new entry into this geographic region in the last 2 years. So I'm really happy to be here and meet everybody on the panel today.
No, that's great. And it's great to have healthcare covered by both of y'all, and just appreciate both of y'all participating. Lauren, thank you for that.
Sure.
Amir with TalkSense, welcome. Great to have you. Tell us who you are. Tell us who you're with.
Yeah, hi Bradley. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of TalkSense, and what we focus on is helping organizations actually fight their internal bureaucracy. So essentially, every organization will have a lot of people working for them, and they need to send out their report, whether they are a healthcare organization or a commercial, industrial, logistics, etc. Everyone needs to update their status, their meeting summaries, their feedback, inventory, whatever. And we find that a lot of organizations just doesn't get this information in time, accurately enough. It's a hustle. Everybody works with a CRM, knows that they basically hate typing in all the information. Anyone who works in sales probably can sympathize with that. 60% of data doesn't get in from some statistics, and we want to solve it through voice. So by talking to an interface, it can be our native application, our customer's application, edge device, etc. The user can simply speak out all the information they want, and what we will do, we will process that beyond transcription. So we're not transcribing the information and put it elsewhere. We're just capturing the information and process that based on our own proprietary technology, and we push it to the right location. So whether it is a Salesforce CRM or another platform, the user can speak. It can be in any language, and based on our secret sauce, we're able to kind of find the right matches or to manipulate even the input so that it will fit to what the platform is looking for. So we service customers in different use cases and territories, and I'm very excited to be here today.
That's great, and we appreciate you being here. Your last name is Tsrouya. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, I'm based in Israel. I'm from Israel, and it's in Hebrew it is Tsrouya. I'm not expecting you to practice that now, but we can take it offline.
Okay. All right. No, yeah.
It's fine.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Rana, welcome back to the show. Rana Gujral of Behavioral Signals. Tell us what you do.
Bradley, thanks for having me back here. Rana Gujral, the CEO of Behavioral Signals. Behavioral Signals is an applied AI company that's focused on certain specific areas of dialogue processing and conversational AI. Our core has been in extracting intelligence and signals from the tone of voice, or the field of behavioral signal processing. In many ways, we're the pioneers in this space. We came up with the first implementations of tone of voice engines, and we've continued to push the boundaries around this technology ever since. Roughly, to understand the technology, it's extracting intelligence real time. That could be roughly categorized in three buckets: emotions like anger, happiness, sadness. Then there's behaviors like engagement, empathy, politeness. And then the third bucket is probably the most interesting. These are macro KPIs that the industry really cares about, such as pinpointing a live NPS score in the moment, customer satisfaction metric of how a person's feeling at the point. Also, other advanced things such as identifying someone's stress level or duress level or even control, and other aspects of agent engagement, etc. We've also built a few advanced prediction engines, like predicting the intent to buy, predicting the intent to pay, all real time. And we have a specific product that we've brought to market, which we call AI-mediated conversations engine, that creates a conversational bioprint, which is a vector file of about 75 to 100 attributes that uniquely identifies how someone converses. And then using that information, we create intelligent matches in a call center, contact center. So as you guessed, I mean, our primary implementations are in the contact center space, both collection, CX, sales, etc. But we also have some other advanced use cases that we apply at, and we work with our friendly, neighborhood three-letter agencies in the United States and in Five Eyes, and on some other advanced use cases as well. So we have sort of a dual focus, both on the CX side, contact center, and other ancillary use cases. So yeah, thanks for having me, Bradley.
Yeah, great to have you. Great to have all four of you, and appreciate y'all making the time and just being so generous with your knowledge as well. So with that, we're going to get into the news, and we're going to combine stories number 1A and 1B here and just talk about generative for a minute. Story 1A, what's new with GPT-4 from processing pictures to acing tests? An article from The Verge that somebody spent a long time putting together, really well done. 1B is Anthropic unveils generative AI chatbot Claude, and that's from our friends at voicebot.ai. So we'll go through the same order that we did introductions in, and Rana, if you don't mind muting yourself back. My first question, and Amy, I'll start with you, and Lauren and Amir, and then Rana. First of all, it's been a busy week with all this generative stuff, and the first question is, what stands out most to you between these two stories in terms of what's been going on? My second question, and I'll just throw it in there, is Anthropic really wants to present this, in the VoiceBot article, presented this as that everybody wants to frame themselves as the competitor to ChatGPT. Do you view this as Anthropic being a worthy competitor to ChatGPT, or that will ultimately have a million different players and Anthropic is just who this article happened to be written about? So paint me a picture with your thoughts.
Well, I'm a mom of 4 school-age kids, and one of the things I thought about was whether or not they were going to use the new GPT-4 to pass all their exams. So I was like, well, man, I got to make sure they're still actually being educated and exercising their brain. So that's one of the things that stood out for me, but that's personal, and I digress on that. I mean, I found myself thinking about cultural implications, and just how, especially like in companies like Lauren's, how do we make sure that these bots and the technology considers the cultural implications, not just the language implications. Take home message was, they continue to mess up, so let's not overly emphasize what they can do. The Claude AI tool, one of the things that I thought was really cool that stood out to me was just their focus on behavioral, being able to kind of match their customer, their user based on behavior. It made me wonder if you could like put in your Enneagram or your DISC assessment and have it adjust to you and your style. I thought that was a really a differentiating point that they seem to connect on, and also that they are more accurate, less able to make mistakes. I found myself wanting to know more about why that is.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's I'm in complete agreement with a number of things you just said. My wife and I have an 11-year-old son, and there's no telling how different his educational path will be just from here to the end of K-12, much less whatever comes after that. There's a visual that's floating around. I don't think it's in the Verge piece, but it's been kind of floating around the internet, where it shows how GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 before it has done on standardized tests. And the answer is shockingly well for the majority of them, which raises the question of what value do those have anymore. That's probably a longer conversation. That's great commentary. Lauren, I'm coming to you. Same questions. Your thoughts as you sort of gaze upon these two stories, and if you think this is shaping up to be a competition between juggernauts, or if there's just going to be a lot of different players.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 things stood out for me in particular. First was sort of along the same lines that you and Amy were both relaying, just but in the sense of things being, teaching to the test, so to speak. So in other words, it can memorize a certain output and spit that back, but it's not actually learning, which I think is important from an education or a parenting perspective, which I know is not the theme here, but that's just something that's stood out to me because similarly, have those thoughts as well. We all kind of grew up in a time where you had to really study and put in the effort and, reap the rewards, so to speak. And now, not that there weren't shortcuts before, but what does this mean for society in general in terms of how we measure progress and learning and evolution and education? Obviously is kind of a more philosophical reaction to the article, but I would say just concretely, what really stood out to me was just how fast this is shifting. I mean, a few months ago, the general mainstream would have had no idea about any of this, right? And now we're not just talking about one, we're talking about one, its improvements and a major competitor potentially. And so I think it's just, emblematic of the space that this all is taking place in and how you can't really call anything to be set in stone as it's evolving in real time and, the continuous changes. The other thing that came to mind for me was, getting kind of back to healthcare, which is where, I've spent 20 years, is around the health equity component of it, right? So access to this type of technology is not going to be available for everyone, and the benefits of it are not going to be accessible for everyone. So how do we really prevent this from being another way that becomes kind of more like concierge medicine or something where only a small percentage of the population reaps the benefits, and making sure that there's guardrails put in place so it doesn't sort of go off into a place where there's the haves and the have-nots that are benefiting from these types of advancements in care. Those were the things that really stood out for me.
No, I think that's great, and it echoes. Seems like I'm having a lot of conversations these days about the parallels between what's going on now and what was going on 4 or 5 years ago. Because when Alexa surged into the public fore, it's all anybody wanted to talk about, created a lot of ethical concerns. That was all a lot of people wanted to talk about. But with regards to equity issues, those were also talked about because Amazon's customer base gravitates, and it skews, probably a better word, skews more educated, skews more affluent. And consequently, people who had access to Alexa and Echo devices skewed the same way. And so there was a lot of equity issues that came out of that. And today, it looks a little different because it's different players. But still the same themes are kind of bubbling up to the surface, and your comments are well made and well taken. Amir, I'm coming to you. Same question for you. What stood out between these two stories, and what's happened this week with all this stuff, and your thoughts on the competitive landscape of it all?
Sure. So obviously the release of ChatGPT 4 is a major. It's all over. It's major news issues all over, and echoing Amy's feedback, my high school kid also came to me the day after the release and said, "Hey, did you see what's new in the latest ChatGPT?" And it's not like he's 20 years programmer in the industry. So it's really what's interesting for me to see. Obviously, the speed that, as you mentioned, that we see these new upgrades in the already overwhelming technology, and we didn't talk about the visual generative AI, the mid journeys, and the rest of them, which are really mind blowing, and it's fascinating to see that the information about that and the curiosity that it generates goes around all different types of audiences, not related to the tech industry, not related to the software industry. It's really all over, and it's really going to be kind of connected to the other question. It will be very interesting to see how this will be manifested into different products or services. Because as soon as a new LLM, large language model is released, or a new AI tool is released, we start to see the possible applications of it, how you can write your resume, how you can generate social media content, etc., and the new tools that allows you to do that, relying on the OpenAI or the other competitive which will come around, because we already see the other giants kind of making their ways into releasing their own tools. We just saw the Google's recent AI demo of what's coming up into the Google platform. So it's going to be very interesting. And as for Claude, it's again, it's the way that it kind of brings the generative AI into the enterprise world, whether it is a smart chatbot or a contact center agent, so to speak. It seems like we are kind of moved significantly in the past few months, and the future seems exciting, but also in some way frightening.
It's interesting they named it Claude. It reminds me of the conversations we had years ago, again, on the voice assistant side of things. Like I remember, when Bank of America came out and said, hey, our thing is called Erica. And for them, it makes sense because that's like 5/7 of the word America, right? But there were still questions around, making that with a female identity. There was a lot of stuff with that, and it's interesting to see how some of the same things with these chatbots now. We're reliving a little bit of that, but no, I thought that was great. So Rana, I'm coming to you. Same question as before. Your thoughts on the events of this week and the competitiveness of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, first off, ChatGPT 3 was very impressive, and GPT-4 is an order of magnitude more impressive, and it's quite exciting actually to see the progression. It's different in a few ways. We should talk about that. It's more robust from a perspective of sort of gaming the prompts. It's less easier to fool than ChatGPT. I've played around with that, and it's definitely harder. It's also very different from a perspective that it's multimodal. It can understand images and other aspects. Other modalities are also being added pretty quickly, which is pretty mind-boggling. The fact that one of the demos showed that you could write on a piece of paper, sort of like a concept of a web page, and then take a picture, and then it understands it, does an OCR, creates a full website based on just a handwritten note on a piece of paper. Pretty impressive. It can process a lot more words. I think about 8 to 10 times, about 25,000 words at once. Than ChatGPT 3. It's extremely powerful. And the most exciting, in my opinion, is that it's less likely to respond to disallowed content, which makes it safer to use, which was always a concern. So which then in turn means that they can, turn the tap on the full power of it, because most of the audience never really sort of got a feel of the real ChatGPT 3. This was sort of like the retail version, which wasn't really the more powerful version. We did so if you're in academia and you have access to certain things, it could actually get access to the real ChatGPT 3, which has a lot more capability. So ChatGPT 4, I think more of the sort of the regular users, common users, would get access to the powerful version because it's safer, to the safety built in. So I think it's really, really interesting. I think now coming back to Anthropic's Claude, I think for me, the most interesting thing that stood out in Claude was the concept of the constitutional AI, which they came up with, which I thought was pretty unique. So I think the way it works is that they've come up with sort of like, just like 10 commandments, they've come up with sort of 10 principles, and they've sort of called it the constitutional AI, and they haven't really made those public, but they're sort of like, grounded in three sort of larger themes. One is positive impact, and then there is the safety, which is avoiding giving harmful advice, and then the third is the freedom of choice, respecting that. And so this is new, right? So GPT-4 doesn't really do that. It has some filters, but it doesn't really have, say, a code of conduct or a constitution. And so here, Claude, if you give it an input and it comes out with an output, it revises the responses in accordance with the Constitution, and it comes up with a response that is sort of in line with that code of conduct, and it's more human-like, I guess. So it's more society-like in that sense, which is pretty interesting. From what I understand, I haven't really played much with Claude, but it's a pretty effective, pretty smart system. I think we're seeing many of these implementations come to Forte. So it's fairly exciting times. Yeah.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And I was just having a conversation with a member of the media about this before coming on the show about, and was asked the question, are these companies working with generative AI capable of self-regulating, whether the large or some of the startups or what, regardless of the size? And the answer is not just no, it's hell no. No, we've seen it over and over and over again, and they would love to have you think that what they're doing is sufficient. And there's no shortage of well-intentioned people who work for these companies. But if history has anything to tell us, it's that whether in technology-related companies or other types of companies, companies do not police themselves, especially when it comes to something this competitive. I struggle to think of anything with this level of competitiveness than AI has right now. There's so much on the line. And when push comes to shove, not just with capitalistic measurements, but societal measurements. And so it's good that there's, companies thinking about it, but is it sufficient to ward off third-party involvement? I would say, let's hope not, would be my reaction to that. I want to go in reverse order for story number 2, because it dovetails well off the back of what we just got done talking about. I'm going to read this headline. This is from the New York Times. How Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant lost the AI race. I'll read the subhead here. The virtual assistants had more than a decade to become indispensable, but they were hampered by clunky design and miscalculations, leaving room for chatbots to rise. So, Rana, I'm going to start with you and go in the reverse order. What's next for voice assistants? Is it nothing for a while? Are they about to surge back? Paint me a picture. What's the next chapter?
Yeah, but before I respond to that, I just want to add a comment to your previous message. So regulation, self-regulation. So how many years have we been doing banking, Bradley? I think a few hundred years. And how well is that going from a self-regulation standpoint, right? Enough said, right? So I think it is what it is. I don't think it's an AI thing. Banks know not to over leverage. Banks know not to take the money market money and put it in risky investments. Banks know that they need to maintain a certain ratio. And then I said, I think enough said, right? So still things like that happen. So when you have a capitalist economy for profit and there's a race, there is no self-regulation. And especially from this perspective, we don't even understand what to regulate, to be honest. I mean, what does need regulation? What is actually, requiring control? those answers, those questions, we don't know the questions that we need to answer. So obviously we don't know those answers. So I think it's really sort of like uncharted territories for the most part. And it's worrisome from that standpoint, very worrisome, I'd say. And there's going to be some situations which is going to cost certain, that we can have some implications, and then we're going to have to learn from that. Coming back to this one, so I think there's a couple of thoughts, right? So, I mean, first of all, there's a few obvious missteps the way I see it. One is, the design, the clunkiness, like for example, let's pick on Alexa because it's been the pioneer in many ways, right? So they definitely overinvested in making, the hardware side, and then they also underinvested. And I think that's one of the things that the article calls out as well, which I think is very, very true. It's on the money that, the ecosystem around expanding on the capabilities, it was extremely clunky. And I personally, because I led back in the day the smart home business for Logitech, and we built a lot of these products that were sort of built on top of the Alexa ecosystem. And it was extremely hard to add a skill, if you're building a third-party accessory and sort of connecting that with that, it was not sort of like an intuitive, it wasn't really like the App Store. I mean, that's the experience, which again, the article calls out, I think. So that kind of was problematic, and Apple was no better. And of course, I don't think Cortana even needs worth mentioning here. So I think that kind of led to that growth, that sort of like capping the growth in terms of sort of where these experiences can go beyond some of these simpler elements. But I also think that I don't think it's done and over with yet. I think what you're seeing is sort of like, there is what these voice assistants did was to push the boundaries on various aspects of NLP and NLU. And it has done a few things. One, it has commoditized, the transcription piece of it and the ASR piece of it, and various aspects of dialogue processing. It's commoditized, and some of these things are really, really good. Understands multiple languages, dialects, understands noisy environments. So now what you would see is probably, the Siri, Alexa, and others will probably start using GPT-4 for the backend, right? And with more realistic voice synthesis that can carry on a conversation, and perhaps even avatars that are generated by AI that match the voice. And it'll come to your living room, it'll come to your smart TV, your therapist, your nurse, your legal help, and as the prompting of these GPT-4 language models, large language models get better, and you have a voice interface that is very advanced and sophisticated, built by these voice engines already, and you connect those two, you have some amazingly new experiences come in. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is the whole voice bot, chatbot space. How will that be disrupted when a new company that can take some of these building blocks and plug into an LLM API can deliver an experience that is superior to, say, a company that has taken hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of funding and also built some specialized and niche experiences, let's say for legal and for that. And there's a lot of things potentially getting disrupted in that category. We're still trying to just figure this out. So summarize, I think, yes, missed opportunity, lots of lost dollars, obviously, as you can sort of see with the massive layoffs in Amazon. Most of them are in the Alexa group. But also, I'd say not done and over with yet. I mean, voice is here to stay, and combining these elements with the elements of large language models will make for a more sort of like, it also sort of gets us closer to AGI in many ways, and it's going to be fairly interesting.
No, that's great. Yeah, you covered a lot of ground there, and I agree with a lot of what you said. Amir, I'm going to go to you. You heard what Rana said. He recapped a lot of stuff in there. What's next for voice assistants?
Indeed, I think that in light of the recent crisis, Rana mentioned at the end of his last statement, Obviously, we see some. My perspective is that there is some collision that we see within this industry. Obviously, it is within the landscape of my company, TalkSense, though we target a different audience and different customers. So within the smart speaker / personal voice assistants, I think that there's a growing awareness by the audience to the ethical issues of the commercial giants that are using them, in many cases, proprietary personal data of their users. So the control that these corporations have over the data that we kind of volunteering to provide is being manipulated by them, and it becomes in some way aware, or people becomes aware of that, and we see that in result, many of the usages that the consumers are doing with personal assistants are usually stays within the playing the music, getting the recent weather, or simple things like that, and it didn't shift it into the voice commerce, shopping via voice, etc., which would have been the next step in growth of this of the platform. I agree that in light of new technology, mainly in the background for NLPs and other more sophisticated way to process the information, it will be interesting to see what direction these organizations will take in order to kind of justify or still use the huge technologies they built in order to make it viable and grow further.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think there's a question of how quickly they manage to do it as well, which is what I'm watching for. Is just like all four of y'all are sitting there thinking, to what extent do we need to be incorporating stuff like ChatGPT into what we're doing? These big tech players that move way slower than the four of y'all, they're having a lot of trouble with it. And even if you make the decision to incorporate LLMs, such as ChatGPT into what you're doing, lest we forget, OpenAI is moving at such a breakneck rate of speed that you have to like synchronize yourself. I think of the scene in Interstellar, where they have to synchronize the shuttle up to the space station in order to dock. It's very similar to that. So yeah, I appreciate what you said. Lauren, I'm coming to you. Same question. Very simple. What's next for voice assistants?
Yeah, I think just taking a look through that article and in general, I think there's going to have to be sort of a convergence of those two technologies in order for them to continue to remain relevant. In other words, using it for something as basic as the weather seemed great at the time, and to the point of the article, kind of hasn't gotten much more complicated or much more useful than that. So I think there's going to have to be some sort of way for the voice command prompts and tools to leverage the technology that's coming to be more commonly understood in all of these discussions around ChatGPT-4, where you could say, kind of the things that people are currently programming to make it more broadly or consumer friendly. Otherwise, it's going to remain sort of on the fringe. I would say, though, that the things, of course, kind of putting the healthcare lens on things as I do, one thing that still comes to mind for me around the voice tools is the element of privacy. That's always going to be a concern. And I think now even more than ever, things around, I think one of you just mentioned sort of the listeners that aren't really necessarily supposed to be privy to some of this information related to healthcare. I think it's going to take a long time for people to trust that they can use that type of mechanism to share private or personal health information. In an ideal world, you could skip a lot of the inefficiencies in healthcare with your provider, perhaps by speaking those things into a tool such as Alexa. But I don't think, personally speaking, that there's enough trust in who the listeners are and what they'll use that information for, to see that being a widespread application in the relatively near future. I think there's a lot of trust that needs to be gained first before it can be something broadly applicable, at least in the healthcare space.
On the subject of trust, do you think that it matters the difference between Alexa, being the progeny of Amazon, one of the largest companies around, versus ChatGPT being the progeny of OpenAI, a company that just seemingly sprung up yesterday, has gotten large, but pretty much a startup tale. Is there a difference there in your mind? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally, subscribe to this opinion, but I do understand that people are either, very favorable around Amazon and everything it's doing with relation to healthcare and innovation there. They've obviously entered into that space with a very clear agenda, or they're very cautious of it. And so depending on sort of where you fall in those two realms, I think that would affect whether or not that's a concern. Whereas OpenAI doesn't necessarily have the same widespread reputation of creating sort of a brand or a visceral reaction that Amazon does, just by the nature of its rapid growth into all different industries, displacing smaller businesses, et cetera. I think people are either kind of all in on Amazon being the solution for most things, or they are strongly against that being the answer. And so whereas OpenAI, I don't think necessarily has the same sort of reactive impression as of yet.
That's great. Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the impromptu follow-up there. Sure. Amy, I'm coming to you. Same question. And you heard what Lauren said from a healthcare point of view. In your estimation, what's next for voice assistants?
Yeah, well, I echo the thoughts already expressed regarding the technology, the AI needing to catch up, and I suspect they will try to stay course and pace with ChatGPT, but be really challenging. Where I sit, so our company is, serves businesses in healthcare. And so I'm thinking a lot during this conversation about the B2B application. And there was actually an article published yesterday on NPR about just how much poorer customer service is being viewed by consumer populations, in the last year or two, when chatbots and IVR and virtual assistants and voice response has supposedly continued to evolve. So I just see a huge opportunity for the business application to improve significantly. In our business, we do a lot of ingesting not only human to human conversations, but human to bot conversations, and the level of frustration is palpable on the part of the consumers that are trying to engage. And I don't know if that's just because it's a healthcare conversation, and so there's a lot more emotion involved and sensitive topics, or if it's just because it's just that bad. It's so very complex to try to get your things, your questions, your issues solved. And so there's a huge amount of room that needs to be made up for with assistance, virtual assistants on the B2B side.
I saw something interesting yesterday amidst all the GPT stuff. And I struggle to remember what the source was, but it was somebody who figured out that you can go to GPT-4 enabled AI and present just a very small amount of information about a merchant account charge, like a credit card charge that you've had with different codes and abbreviations and stuff that would make no sense to like 99.9% of people. And you can say, ChatGPT, what business is this? What business charged this? Tell me everything you can about this charge that showed up on the bank statement. And this thing wrote it all. It named the business, the address of the business, like the EIN, all this stuff. And my mind goes to just hearing your response. I've had plenty of healthcare issues over my life. I would love to be able to, among other things that I wish were different about your industry, I wish I could go to some sort of technology like ChatGPT or the like and say, find all my medical records, go find them, and come back to me when you've got them all. I'll give you some information. I lived here, or actually better yet, you can just go search for me. You can pull my credit, you can pull my background check, whatever it is you want to go pull, you go find it. And boy, that would just be powerful, because just from a healthcare point of view, I have a lot of resources, and it's hard for me even to keep up with all of my medical records, much less somebody else who doesn't. So that's just one aspect of many that could be different about healthcare, and it's exciting just to hear you and Lauren ruminate on all of this, not just with the voice assistants, but with the previous story as well. So we've got about 5 minutes left. In story number 3, I'm going to read it out loud because it's among other things, it's the first article from CX Today that we've ever had on the show. So I want to make sure I get it on here for the record. From Charlie Mitchell: Gartner Magic Quadrant for Enterprise Conversational AI Platforms 2023. That's not a sentence, but basically the article is recapping who Gartner put on their Magic Quadrant chart. So my question is going to be real simple, and this will be short and take us to the end. I'm going to go in the original order. So Amy, I'm going to start with you. You can give me a 1-sentence answer or something close to that. Do you care about Gartner and this chart?
I find it interesting. I think there's a lot of solutions that are missing. And I wish that conversational AI could be a broader topic than chatbot alone. We consider ourselves conversational AI, and we're all about listening, synthesizing, and giving the whole so what of all this unstructured data.
So I hear a sort of not really there. No, that's good. Lauren, same question for you. I've seen a bunch of people talking about this chart, but I've also seen a bunch of people talking negatively about the chart. Do you care? Does Wysa care?
I think my answer would be similar to Amy's, in that I think it's a more narrow view than we would take as well. Similarly, we are also delivering conversational AI and have done so for 7 years already at this point, with almost 1 million conversations. And I think it's a good way to aggregate some of the bigger players just for the general public, but I don't think it should be viewed as sort of the end all be all of those in the industry, or those worth paying attention to or noticing. I think I would argue that there are many, such as Wysa and others, that would fall into that bucket as well if we were really taking a comprehensive look.
Excellent. And Amir, coming to you, you're in a little bit different of a sphere, but still I'm gonna ask you the same question. Do you care about this? Does this resonate with you at all, this Gartner Magic Quadrant?
In general, I think the Gartner analysts are doing very thorough work when they analyze a market, a segment, a technology, a trend, etc. But I also agree with Amy and Lauren. It's in many cases, it's especially if you are not in a business which is in the major part of the report, we will not fall exactly under what it covers. So it might not be covering enough areas or enough space to include what you are doing.
Okay, so that's good. And Rana, same question to you. Gartner Magic Quadrant on conversational AI. Does this matter to you? Does this something you pay attention to? Does it resonate at all?
I mean, I'd say I care about it a lot. because it's very misleading. So it has to be cared about from that perspective. But having been in this industry for a while, you have to understand that that Gartner works in a certain way. There are specific sort of attributes around categorization of certain terms that they use, and you have to sort of understand it under that context. And it often might seem misleading because in the industry, the word conversational AI has tends to be overused. I think pretty much every company now sort of speaks to branding themselves as a conversational AI player. But Gartner has a very specific definition of that, and then there are other aspects of dialogue processing and conversation AI that they call under different terms and different names. And so they're speaking of something, but most readers and the industry is looking at it from a different perspective. So I think there's misalignment, and I think there needs to be a correction for that, because obviously what the industry thinks is probably the more important part, because that's what sort of creates this aspect of this being misled. So I think from that perspective, and I do agree with what Amy said in the beginning, that it's way more. I mean, the sector is way more than just voice bots and chat bots. There's a lot of other aspects that go into it outside of chat bots. But the categorization is somewhat complex. Yeah, it could be simplified.
It seems a little lacking. That was my response when I spoke to CX today about it. Gartner is full of sophisticated, intelligent people, but I'm not sure how useful this magic quadrant is, except to the marketing departments of those various enterprises, which might have a different opinion. For This Week in Voice, thanks to all of y'all for being our guest. Fantastic. We appreciate all of you. Amy, Lauren, Rana, Amir, thank you for taking the time to be part of the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Bradley.
For This Week in Voice, Season 8, Episode 9, thank you for listening. If you're on your podcast provider of choice and watching, if you're watching us on YouTube, until next time.